Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, ISE webinar, which we're bringing in partnership with our friends over at Amberjack. My name's Steve Isherwood. I'm Joint Chief Executive here at the ISE. Try not to shiver. I hope you're warmer than I am. Our heating's just gone off, so when I turn my camera off, I might do some star jumps to warm up. That's probably not an image that you want to see right now. So if you've tuned into an ISE webinar in the past, you'll know the drill, but just a reminder, we've got some great content lined up for you. We've got the Amberjack team and other presenters talking all about students transitioning into the workplace, where the professional skills gaps are, how L&D programs are evolving to manage these challenges and all other related topics to that. And very shortly, I'll be handing over to Jenny, who's head of L&D UK for Amberjack. We like to make these as participative as possible. So we've got the chat and we've got the Q&A functions. I'll be keeping an eye on those as we go through the main body of the session. So if you've got any questions for the panel, please pop them into there, and we'll have roughly 10 minutes at the end where we'll be able to cover those off. So without further ado, let's hand over to the Amberjack team and over to Jenny. Jenny, would you like to take it over? Welcome to the webinar for today.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. Really looking forward to the session. Hope that it leaves you with more awareness of what we can all be doing to support the next generation of leaders as they're joining our increasingly complex and multi-generational organisations. We've got a lot to get through, as usual, and we're going to be looking at the professional skills gap, as Stephen just mentioned, that many of us are talking about day in, day out. Why we think they exist, and what we can do to support Gen Z as they enter the workplace to ensure that they've got those boosted levels of confidence and competence to succeed. With me today, I'm delighted to have Morgan, Future Talent Manager at BII, and Neave Taylor, Learning and Development Delivery Manager here at Amberjack. And alongside them, hugely grateful for all the time and effort that Atisha, I know Atisha's experiencing a few technical issues this morning, so if he can't join, then we've got a backup in Jasmine, who will jump on. Kieran from Amberjack and Ronke, all part of our Gen Z advisory board, so joining us to bring their very own Gen Z perspectives to the discussion today. So welcome to everybody. I thought it would be useful just to look at who the generation that we're talking about. So this is our next generation of leaders, and a generation really just like any other who need support and a safe space for learning and taking risks. We're all hiring them into our organisations on programmes to ultimately help us innovate and help us to break boundaries and become those future leaders. So I think we really do need to celebrate who they are, as well as provide them the right support so that they can align with our business needs and flourish within our organisations. So just very quickly, who are they? They started to enter the workforce in about 2018. So many of them were impacted in some way by the pandemic at a really critical time in their studies, be that sort of A-levels or whilst they were at university, or even very early on as they started their first jobs. And we'll come on to explore in this session the impact that's had. They really value approachable leadership, so leadership that's really visible and honest within the organisation that they're working for, and also career progression, constantly wanting to improve and go up that career ladder. And you know, we hear all the time from our Gen Z advisory board that they love to learn. They want that consistent and constant feedback, which sometimes can pose challenges to us internally. But a large proportion also suffer from imposter syndrome, and I think we all have a part to play in normalising this within our organisations to ensure that they really understand that failing is okay, and that's how you learn, and making that feel normal. And then finally, the CEO positions early on in their careers. I think many are already CEOs of startups, have set up their own businesses, TikTok sensations. You know, they bring a huge amount of entrepreneurialism to our organisations, which we need to embrace. As many of you will know, they're digital natives. They've got an absolute passion for inclusivity and diversity of thought. And on the wellbeing front, I think are doing a kind of paving the way and holding us all accountable, us being other generations within the organisations, accountable. And it's only a good thing if that will improve our working lives. So I think some of the attributes that they bring to our organisations, we really need to work on embracing. But it's fair to say that there are challenges, and we're seeing more and more conversations around the disconnect between skills that graduates have when they leave university and the skills they're expected to have when they start work. I think for the first time, some organisations have got 5 generations working alongside each other, and clearly that's going to pose some challenges. I think Gen Z generation, just like any other, embarking on their careers, just like we all did, and we faced into these challenges. They're just different in some ways. And with the difference, I suppose, with Gen Z is the pandemic that they've all lived through, but also the social media explosion that they're continuing to live through, which has brought positive experiences, but also very negative ones as well. I think just briefly, before I bring Morgan into the conversation, some of the main challenges that we're speaking to organisations around are professional communication. So many of the Gen Zers currently in or joining the workforce completed the final years of their studies at school through the pandemic, and many were very isolated. Everything was done online, and even that socialising all done online and continues to be done online. And so this is undoubtedly impacting on their ability and their confidence to communicate. Particularly, we're seeing face-to-face contribution in meetings, speaking and writing professionally. All of these things are challenges that we're experiencing in our organisations. And I think not because Gen Z aren't capable, but because they haven't had the experience of working in the way that we're expecting them to work when they join us. I think another key challenge that we're all seeing is resilience. We speak to clients about this all the time. For those of you who haven't read The Coddling of the American Mind, a book that you should read, talks about the way in which we're raising the next generation. And I certainly think this has got a lot to answer for. I think, if you look at experiences of children at school these days, everyone's a winner. Everyone gets a medal at the end of a race, participation. And while that's got lots of benefits from an inclusivity point of view, it doesn't allow generations to experience failure. There's fewer and fewer broken bones in the playground these days. For those of you that have got children, I'm sure you recognise that. How much are we overprotecting our children and the younger generations, not giving them the opportunity to fail and to learn from this failure? And again, if they haven't been allowed to build resilience, then we need to support them in giving them the experiences that allow them to build that level of resilience in the workplace. I think I'll stop there and come over to you, Morgan, in terms of some of the challenges that you're experiencing at BII and recruiting graduates. I know you've been running the graduate programme there for the last few years. Does some of what I've spoken about there resonate with you in terms of the challenges that you're facing?
Yes, it definitely does. I guess I'd just like to take a step back and give those on the line just some context, which I think might be useful. For us at BII, the graduate programme we implemented 3 years ago, and prior to that, and I know Jenny, you touched on the intergenerational workforce, that prior to hiring graduates at BII, the entry-level position, as we'd call it, at the associate level, we'd historically hire people with minimum 5 years experience. So our workforce, with the exception of our graduate cohort, isn't Gen Z. And I think that one of the challenges that I think we've faced, not so much actually with our first cohort, but as we've seen our second and third cohort, and as we've seen our programme grow, we've really started to see that the challenges and the impact on the business, particularly around the intergeneration piece, and not only for our graduate cohort, but also for our line managers, who haven't managed somebody with no experience before, as they haven't had that exposure to that previously. So it's a bit of a dual challenge for us, both for our graduates, but also for our business, for our line managers, and and senior leaders, because it's the first time that they're interacting with this generation in the workforce for probably quite some time. And then I think we've also seen, and I don't know if others see this, quite a noticeable difference between a master's student versus an undergrad. I think there's a clear difference in the level of maturity, and I think and we experienced that because our first cohort, which was our smaller cohort, they were predominantly, if not all of them, master students. And actually that we didn't think about professional skills. We was very much heavily focused on technical skills, because BI is a very high performing culture, and technically to really build those skills takes time. And so that was really our core focus from our first cohort. And then we've seen, as we've scaled the program, and with our second and third cohort, which has actually been more predominantly undergraduate students, we really started to notice that the disconnect and the words that we can see on the screen here, particularly around communication, personal brand and attitude, and that transition into the workplace. So I think for us, over the journey of the last 3 years, we've seen some different challenges arise. And I think because as well we have the different levels of our graduate program, it also presents even greater challenge, because you have some students who do arrive more work ready and need less of some of the professional skills development, versus those who might have just come straight out of university.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thank you. And I want, in terms of what your line managers are expecting from that client readiness point of view, now you've got a really high performing culture. What do you think they're expecting them to be able to do in those early days?
I think it also differs from one part of our business to the other. So our graduate program is split across our core investment teams, and then our impact teams. So graduates do 12-month rotation is in each, and they're very different skill sets, and they also have very different personalities, and also different, what comes with that is different expectations. I think that, and again, given that our first cohort of graduates actually were high performers, I think it's made it a bit more difficult and set the bar for those who we've hired since. So people do actually have quite high expectations, because we had some, and it's great that we had some top talent within our first cohort, but I think that they unfortunately have set those expectations. But I think we're starting to see actually less of that, and the expectation is that it will take them time to get up to speed, particularly on the investment side, because we're not a commercial bank. We don't see our deal flow is not week by week. Graduates might be lucky if they work on 1 or 2 transactions. So I think that learning curve is actually much steeper. So I think that I guess that has helped with the setting of expectations from line managers, that it's difficult for graduates to get up to speed quickly. And that's actually why we made a change from where we had 3 rotations previously, and we felt that the rotations weren't long enough. So we then scaled it back, removed an international rotation, and now have 2 12 months to really enable that greater development, because it is a steeper learning curve. But I think our managers, they do have high expectations. I think because it is a high performing culture, but also because as I mentioned previously, they're not used to working with people that come in with no experience. So I think it's definitely been a learning curve for our managers, who have also asked for training as well, which is what we've also implemented. So it's a dual approach. It's not just training for our graduates on the professional skills side, but educating our line managers on actually what Gen Z can bring, and also, but not being nervous to give them work, and that they might think, oh, this is too much for somebody, but how do you test them? Like, how do you push and stretch them? And my advice is always to line managers is to actually give them more and throw them in, and allow them that opportunity to, as we've talked about, to fail and to learn from some of their mistakes. And we're actually starting to see quite a bit more of that, which is good to see.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we'll talk about this in a bit more detail later on in the session, but I think, you know, line manager training and buy-in from line managers, setting expectations, as you said, Morgan, into, you know, what Gen Z are really going to bring, what the early talent cohorts are going to bring to their teams, is really critical and can make or break the success of a program. I think that personal brand and attitude piece is also really critical. I think, you know, we will recruit and assess graduates and early talent based on potential. We talk about hiring for potential all the time, and once they are in our organizations, I think they feel, you know, they've won the prize. They've got into the graduate program. They've been successful in getting that opportunity. I think the benefit of having a really well designed and well structured graduate program is that they continue to then improve. You know, James Clear in his book Atomic Habits talks about getting 1% better every day and continuing to better themselves and not go into that kind of coasting zone, going from and then you can kind of take your graduates from that high potential to that high performance, which is exactly where you then want them to be. In terms of Neave, I thought I'd come to you next in terms of you know, you're deep in delivery of workshops day in, day out with our clients, meeting kind of hundreds of graduates each week, running programs for our clients. What are you noticing out there in terms of the cohorts and the individuals you're engaging with?
Yeah, Jenny, you're quite right. We're having a bit of a busy spell at the moment, which is fantastic. But what we are absolutely seeing is that, I think, like this slide says, there are a real range of emotions, as you would expect. But I think what's important to point out from this slide is that these emotions are probably things that we've all experienced when we're doing something new, when we have started a new job. And actually, these are very normal reactions. They're very normal emotions. So we're seeing in our graduates, in our interns, in our apprentices, that yes, they are excited, motivated, eager, ambitious, all of those great positive words there. But equally, they're mixed with anxiety, overwhelm. Are they doing too much? Are they not doing enough? So it's about living up to those expectations, I think, that we mentioned right at the start of our session. They are motivated and they are eager, but they're super worried about living up to those expectations within the workplace. I think what we see from an L&D point of view is that as a facilitator, it's all about building those meaningful connections. So getting to know your cohort that you're working with is something that I really pride myself in doing. But also getting into these feelings. Actually, yes, we're seeing them, but what does that mean for our workshops? How are they showing up to our workshops? Are they showing up feeling motivated and eager, or are they today feeling anxious and overwhelmed? I think as a facilitator, it's really important to identify what your cohort already know, what motivates them to learn, and actually how you bring that out in your workshops as well. What we're seeing, I think, Jenny, as you mentioned, is that as more and more employers are quite rightly employing for potential, we are going to have a lot more diverse skills. We're going to have a lot more experience and variety of confidence within the workplace. So I think there's never been a more clear need for tailored, flexible, and kind of specialist learning and development programs to really support graduates in absolutely coming to development sessions in order to bring out feelings like being motivated and ambitious, and lessening those feelings around being lessening those feelings about being anxious or stressed. And how do we actually achieve that? So absolutely, we're seeing all of these words and more in our development sessions in the organizations, but I think it's about how we build that confidence in our early careers and our early talent. Is kind of begs the question, really.
Yeah, and I think we'll come on shortly and hear from our panelists as to how they feel and what support they feel they need. But if we take a look at why we think there's a growing gap between skills that graduates have and what they need, you know, we talked earlier about the COVID generation and the parenting of this generation. I think that's both of those elements have a lot to answer for. But what we're hearing from our Gen Z advisory board and out on campus with clients when we're delivering workshops is that imposter syndrome is hugely affecting the performance of our early talent populations. I think recent research that I read shows that 82% of those in their 20s and 30s suffer at some point with imposter syndrome. This is much more prevalent in females, and the percentage also declines with age. So at the start of your career, our graduates are feeling more insecure and lacking in confidence more than other age group, more than other generations within our organisations, which is quite concerning, and I think something that we will need to be aware of to provide that structure and support. I think, Neave, coming back to you, you've delivered a number of imposter syndrome workshops and talks. I think it's hugely gaining popularity. Why do you think this generation are suffering so much from imposter syndrome?
Yeah, definitely. Our imposter syndrome sessions and talks are becoming increasingly popular. I think they have such a fantastic place, you know, early on, keep warm, but also throughout the program as well. I think, Jenny, to your point, it's absolutely a feeling that we all experience, whether we are in our early careers or not. Imposter syndrome is there. And I think that's a really key point, is I can't explain enough how heard this generation feel when we go to universities and talk about imposter syndrome, when we go to events for those in their early careers and kind of bring it to the forefront for them. I think, to your question around why it's there so much, I think it's really fueled by that recent and overwhelming access to social media. We are constantly aware of what everybody else is doing at every single moment in our lives. It's absolutely going to be, it's going to make us compare ourselves to others. It's going to make us feel as though we are inadequate in some respect, and I think that's really clear for people in their early careers, but also people that are not in their early careers. I think for me in particular, you know, I've certainly had feelings around, well, why should I try this? Because there's already somebody else doing it 10 times better than I would. And I think for those in their early careers, what I see and throughout discussions around imposter syndrome is that it's about, okay, well, why would that organisation give me a job when there's so many other people that have hit apply? Or there's, you know, you're telling me that this year is incredibly oversaturated in terms of applications per role. Well, why should I apply? What skills do I bring? Why should I speak up in that meeting? Why would they want to hear from me? All of these thoughts stem from comparison. They stem from looking at other people and thinking, actually, they're not going to want to hear from me. It fuels that kind of doubt that we have in our mind. And I think I want to really reiterate when we talk around this is that it's not the fact that this generation are not capable. It's the fact that that doubt can sometimes mask those wonderful capabilities and skills. So I think, again, it begs that question of what are we doing to support and bring out that wonderful confidence in Gen Z and this new generation to make sure that imposter syndrome is banished as best we can. And I think a really lovely thing to do is start early with it, you know, talk about it at throughout induction periods and keep warm, make it part of that culture that it's okay to fail, or, you know, I've experienced these feelings of doubt and imposter syndrome, but actually how are we going to bring out that confidence in this generation to make sure that we're not seeing as big a skills gap I think is a really important point.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think we talk all the time about, you know, making sure that your graduates are being given that safe space to learn and to develop that confidence and be allowed to fail. I think, you know, I often hear of graduates hired onto graduate programs, but in reality, it's just another entry-level role within a team. It's not really a graduate program where they're being given structured training and development and that 2 years or however long the program is to learn and to take those risks. So I think that's where the line manager training also becomes so critical. And not only the line manager training, but the training of the wider team within which the graduate's going to be working, so that they're all aware of the support that they need and how they can work kind of collaboratively together to set the graduates up for success. Morgan, when it comes to skills that you need graduates to have when they join you, which do you think are the most important, would you say, for you at BII?
Yeah, from the professional skills side, I would say that confidence is key. I think I still think we're a small size company, but apparently we're a medium-sized company. We're still a medium-sized company. Like, as an example, deal teams can be, 5 people. And if you're then sitting in a room and you're a grad and you do have an opinion, but you never voice it, it becomes, you just get lost within the organization quite quickly. And yes, I think being confident and being able to, speak up, I think, particularly given the organisation that I work in, it is one of our values is collaboration and caring, and actually, it isn't a hierarchical organisation, and it's, graduates having that confidence in being able to say their view and opinion, and it really is encouraged. And I think I hear, some managers say, even with that encouragement, we're still not seeing that, we're still not getting that. But also obviously appreciate, neurodiversity and, interested personalities. So that does take time, and I understand that it can be, quite, graduates can be quite nervous and not feel that their opinion is, valid, heard, or even correct. I think also we're quite a complex organisation, so, and it's the work we do is very challenging. So resilience is again quite key. You could be working on something and working on it for months, and then it doesn't get to ISE. So being able to have that resilience on that, you've done all of this work and actually it's, essentially for nothing. So I think for us, that is quite key, and also working with ambiguity, the markets in where we invest. It's difficult, it's challenging, the information's not always there, so being able to work in that type of environment, I think, is also quite key for our grads.
Yeah, okay. We'll come on and explore, I think, in a little bit how we can support this generation entering our organisations to upskill in those areas. But I'd like to bring in our Gen Z panel now. Thank you so much for coming and for your input into this conversation. I think, Ronke, I'll start with you. How does all that we've been discussing sound to you? What skills do you feel you need to develop before joining an organisation?
Okay. I'm just going to give a bit about my background because I think that influences a lot how I see things. And also my voice might pitch up and down because I feel very nervous right now. I'm not sure why.
Don't worry, relax.
Okay.
Everyone's really excited to hear from you guys, so just relax.
So I'm an international student. I started university here when I was 16. I flew on a flight by myself to come into this country. So yes, I am Gen Z in that age, but I think a lot of my experiences with work has pertained more to the fact that I'm not from this country. And I think the most difficult thing for me and for a lot of people with my background is imposter syndrome, and entering into the spaces feeling like I have no idea what's going on here. No matter how much research I do, I always feel like I'm not sure if I fit in. And I think that would influence why I wouldn't feel comfortable bringing up my idea. I try to overcome it, but it's a very big hurdle to overcome, the feeling that you're not meant to be here, or I'm here just by a fluke. And so yeah, I really resonated with that. But I also feel like in Gen Z, they're different people with different experiences. And I feel like I'm not really sure about resilience just because of my personal circumstances and a lot of people that I know. I don't know if I would say on a whole we're not resilient, but I would agree completely that a lot of us do struggle with imposter syndrome. I hope
that's really question. And coming back to the imposter syndrome, it's interesting to look at, are you affected more in certain situations than in others? And what support would you like to receive from employers to try and overcome the imposter syndrome that you're feeling?
Yes, I think in meetings generally, where you see everyone sat and everyone has such bright ideas, and sometimes you might have the bright ideas as well, but thinking about how to say it in a way that doesn't make you sound stupid, or you're constantly overthinking, oh, but what if, I'm sure everyone already knows that I don't want to say that and sound stupid, because you want to fit in, you don't want to stick out like a sore thumb and make everyone know that you're Gen Z. And in terms of how to improve it, and in terms of support, I did a vacation scheme, which is like an internship for law over the summer. And obviously, I was panicking. I tried my best not to show it, but I was in my head, I just thought, wow, this is, I was trying to explain to my mom what was going on. Neither of my parents understood like what commercial law even was. So there was just like, there was no support at home. And I came to work thinking, I hope they don't know that I'm not meant to be here. But I was able to speak to a member of GradRec actually, and I was able to confide in him and just go, actually, I feel like I'm not meant to be here. I'm feeling very panicked. And he just went like, look at what you've done, look at what you're being asked to do. You have the skills to do it. And I thought that was really helpful. And it really helped me because it was someone who had seen my past track record telling me face to face that this is something you can do. So I think that buddy system is really helpful, but not just a random person in the organization who has no idea who I am, but someone who, I know it would be difficult to ask GradRec to speak to every single person you're taking on, but someone who has seen your experience previously, being able to tell you you can do it. I found it really helpful.
So more of like that one-to-one coaching opportunity when you first joined to build your confidence and to really dive into, you know, why you're here. After all, you've worked hard to get onto the program, right? So that should give you confidence in itself, but you need that sort of reassurance and from someone within the organization once you've joined.
Yeah.
Atisha, sorry, Jazz, just coming to you. So we've got the wrong.
Yes,
Atisha
no, don't
had tech issues this afternoon, so sorry that he couldn't join. But Jazz has kindly stepped in. Do you feel? How does what Ronke said resonate with you? And what do you feel that organisations? How do you think you would benefit? Or are there any other areas that you feel you need support with, and you feel are more kind of challenges that you face?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what Ronke is saying, and I wanted to say thank you both to our Gen Z board members who could be here, and Atisha, thank you very much for your time and effort. I come at this from a little bit of a different perspective, I guess, in that I am slightly older of the Gen Z cohort. This was, however, my role at Amberjack was my first full-time job, so I'm still really only at the start of my career. But saying that, and going back and looking at the roles that I had beforehand, in terms of what I felt like I needed to develop, I've always felt anxious, and I think everybody does when it comes to presentation skills. It doesn't matter how many times you've done it, and I think Neave can attest to this as well. I've heard her talk about it many a times. You always feel anxious when presenting, but it's learning how to not necessarily overcome it, but deal with it. And those things come with practice. And as well as that, I think what Ronke was saying about resilience and not being sure whether or not it's a skill that Gen Z lack is quite accurate. I think that there are several areas where we are perhaps one of the most resilient generations that have come, but also in other areas we lack that resilience. And I think that that's going to be different for each and every generation. I think, for example, when it comes to like mental health and huge, world events and then overcoming different environments, we are incredibly resilient. But having that mental health and resilience support at work is one of the things where I would say it is most important. For me and in my team, having that mental health support and being able to just talk about it openly is one of the areas in which I feel most supported and like I can open up when it comes to having those issues. I also think that one of the biggest areas that we could have support, and one of the biggest areas that I maybe struggled with when it came to first joining, is like small talk. I've learned in school how to talk to my peers, and we have the same things to talk about. We're watching the same things and we're on the same platforms. But when you come into a new organization, I don't know what to talk to Gareth from HR about, you know what? So it's about, I think, just having those check-in points with, yeah, different members of the organization, not just your peers, but other people, and bringing them all together. I think that that's a way to support your new hires, but also would develop some of the skills and the confidence that you need before you join. In terms of great things that I've seen from organizations, tasks to be enthusiastic about is one of the best things I think that you can do, because when you're enthusiastic about a task, you want to talk to people about it. You're more confident about it. And I think that that is what makes the difference. Sorry, I don't know if my Wi-Fi was any good there. That's why my camera
that's
was
great.
off.
Thanks, Jazz.
Yeah.
That's great. Kieran, just coming to you, I know you've recently joined us at Amberjack as one of our apprentices. Does what we've been talking about resonate? What skills do you think you needed to develop before joining? And how did you perhaps go about doing that? Or what have you seen since joining in terms of how graduates are supported?
So, I mean, for me, what I've seen is like a lot of communication skills, like where it be just like small talk with your peers, having formal communications over emails, Teams, stuff like that. I feel like our generation are slightly lacking in, from where we've constantly been fed different ways of having communications, whether that be FaceTime, phone calls, text, Snapchat. There's been like an absolute explosion in the way how we communicate with each other, and then going to a more of a binary way of talking to peers, co-workers is I'd say more of a culture shock for us, and is something that a lot of us need to focus on, develop more.
Yeah, that's completely right. I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of a communication explosion. I think many of us, you know, other generations within organizations, there's teams, there's now often you've got a work WhatsApp channel, there's emails, there's so many, and yet you're also talking about Snapchat, you're talking about Instagram, you're talking about TikTok in terms of ways of communicating over and above that. It can be very, very overwhelming. And also, I suppose you need to shift from those modes of communication and the language that perhaps you use within those modes of communication to a more professional environment within an email or Teams, for example. What do you think employers are doing, or what have you seen since you've joined Amberjack that support some of what you've been talking about in developing those skills?
So yeah, so me and Eve have gone across to different unis and companies and done these development sessions, where it's like encouraging development of soft skills, where whether it be like communicating with impact, business etiquette, personal brand. These things are quite helpful for us, where we've always been told about all these different skills, but we haven't been told how to apply it, or like what circumstances to use it in. So having these sessions where it's thoroughly explained, is given with context, and then you're given a chance to show it, helps understand what is needed of us more. And it just helps build out these like employee to employer relationships.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think we're starting to see more of these workshops come onto campus. I think moving away from the sort of CV skills workshops, or how to perform well in an assessment centre, which have their place, but also to try and bridge that gap and increase those develop those skills and increase that level of confidence for the students on campus, so that they can join their internships, their work experience, their graduate programs with that increased level of confidence, and hopefully banishing some of those imposter syndrome thoughts. Ronke, have you had any experience where you think employers are doing great things to build your confidence and set you up for success? Any examples of what they've done?
I'm gonna have to just think about that for a bit, because I had something I wanted to say, which is why I raised up my hand now. Kind of
Sure.
Again, I always go on and on about the buddy system and having like a point of contact that's a bit closer to you that you could go and talk to about those type of things. I think that's really good. And then the firm that I'm joining now has an informal buddy system, and she reached out to me saying, if there's anything you want, you can ask me. And even the form of communication she used was slightly more informal, and it just made me feel very comfortable going into the firm. But I was going to add to what Kieran said in terms of developing these skills. I think the best way to develop a skill is to be able to apply it. And I think part-time jobs are just incredibly helpful with that. I had 8 part-time jobs while I was at university, and I can attribute any skill I have now currently to those jobs. And I think if more companies could offer, I don't know if it'd be possible, like part-time jobs to students, something they could do maybe once a week or twice a week, so that before they finish university, they already have an idea of what's going on in the work life. That would be really good and helpful as a whole.
Yeah. And anything that you've seen in terms of onboarding or sessions on campus or inductions or anything like that that you think, you know, wow, I'd really benefit from that, or that was lacking in that situation? And
I think I would really benefit from workshops on communication and just being able to present myself properly in a work setting, because that's something I never really get an opportunity to do.
Yeah. And is that particularly in a face-to-face setting, or virtual, or a blend of both? Where do you feel that the gaps lie more?
I think with written communication, I can take a lot more time to type out what I want to say, look through it over and over again to make sure that the tone is right. But with oral communication like this, presenting or just speaking to people, I don't know if this is just a me thing or it's general to Gen Z, but I overthink a lot. And so I'm thinking, is that the right way to say it? Is that not the right way to say? Is that too formal, too informal? So I think it'd be nice to have workshops that just help me instill me with confidence, this is how to say things in work settings.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Kieran, how do you feel about that? Any particular areas that you'd like companies to focus on, organizations think to focus on, and that are most important for you to develop?
I think key one is just soft skills, like just in general, like when we talk about like business etiquette, it seems very like an insular topic, but it has a wide impact on everything that you do. So, for instance, like how I'm conducting myself now is how I would conduct myself at the office. It's professional, it's not over convoluting, it's being concise. So I think having these soft skills being implemented into like the induction phase, or even like in between your application being accepted and your start date, having these things given to employees is quite good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all hugely. I think we could carry on chatting for much longer, but I'm conscious of time and wanted to just move on to also enable us to answer some of the questions that I can see have come into the chat. So if we move on in terms of what we can do to support, we've heard from our panelists in terms of where they need support, where they're lacking confidence. I think it's really clear to see that we can start supporting our future early talent cohorts a lot earlier. We've seen a big shift in terms of running some of the workshops on campus, offering students with that support, with networking, with communication, with that imposter syndrome and resilience that we've just been talking about. And that will go a long way, undoubtedly, in ensuring that they're set up for success on day one with you in your organisations. Morgan, in terms of the graduate development programme at BII, I know we've been working with you to set that up. What are you offering now, and why did you make that change to offer a more structured development programme?
Yeah, so we are offering a 2-year professional skills programme to complement the technical skills programme that we run, and also obviously on the job learning. And we've taken the themed approach, and so the first theme has been that personal brand, transitioning into the workplace, business etiquette, all of those things to help set our graduates up for success. But as I mentioned previously, particularly those who might have just recently graduated, not had the opportunity to have an internship, and this might be their first job or exposure to the corporate world. And then following themes such as communicating with impact, navigating change, building resilience. So those are some of the key themes that we're looking at, which we actually did. Well, I went out to our graduate population to say, what do they think their gaps are? And then I asked their managers, what do they think their gaps are? And there were some crossovers and there were some differences for sure, which we saw, which was always interesting to see. But what was good to see that there was engagement from both sides. There was an appetite to implement the programme. And I think that, yeah, it's new for us. We've implemented it, only for this year. And I think what we've seen is that where we've got two cohorts to combine together, that the cohort we hired last year, they're slightly less engaged than the cohort we've just hired. I think because they've been in the business for a year, but we still feel that it's worthwhile them attending these sessions, because we are even with those who've been in the business for a year, we are still seeing some of those gaps, although some of them aren't as aware of their gaps as the others. So it's very new for us. So far so good. We've seen some good engagement in the classroom. I think where we're still seeing some challenges, and Neave has obviously seen these, is that self-paced learning activities. So what we wanted to do as a programme is that we implement and have a training session and a workshop, and then there is self-paced learning activities throughout between one workshop to the next, because I think we're all guilty of it. You go to a training session, you walk out of that training session and you do absolutely nothing with it, you forget about it. So we wanted to ensure that there is that implementation phase, and actually we see that return of investment. But what we're seeing initially is that our graduates are struggling to do that, which is interesting because the first sessions have been on personal brand, etiquette, respect. So it's interesting to see actually that it's still not quite hitting home, but also appreciate that for those who've joined this year, they're new to the business, they're quite busy, they're quite focused on the technical skills, and again, to those who joined last year, some of them think, I know all of this stuff and I'm great at it. So still seeing some challenges, but I think hopefully when we move on to theme 2, which is communicating with impact, I think that we'll start to see greater engagement, because I think for them, that is something that they all know that they're aware that they need and will be helpful. I think the first theme, I think, has been a bit challenging.
Yeah, and interesting, Neave, we were going to talk, I guess the real benefit of that themed approach is that transfer of learning is hopefully so high, because you've got the workshop and then you've got the pre-work and the post-work. Neave, do you want to talk a bit more about how that themed approach works in the context of what you're running for Morgan at BII?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for learning and development spaces, ROI has been a real sticking point for both the organisation wanting to know what is the return on investment for all of this money I've spent on wonderful workshops, but also for L&D specialists to need to evidence this ROI and kind of to gain more of a standing in organisations as well. So I think what the themed approach to learning does, to Morgan's point, absolutely supports in that proving of return on investment. So the themed approach to learning is structured around really achieving transfer of learning. So we know that transfer of learning is key to that behaviour shift, those skills developments, those attitudes that we see in the workplace changing. We need to achieve transfer of learning in order to evidence our return on investment, if you like. So what the themes approach to learning does is it really promotes this holistic approach to learning. So Morgan's reference there to self-paced learning activities takes learning beyond the workshop. So rather than having a standalone workshop with pre and post work, and as Morgan quite rightly said, what we tend to find is you do attend one workshop and you think, wow, that was fantastic, but there's no option to apply it back to the workplace. So I think, Ronke, your wonderful point around always having learning being able to be applied is really important. So from an L&D point of view, that is exactly what we need to try and achieve when we're delivering meaningful workshops and meaningful programs. So the themed approach to learning follows as many themes as you like over a period of time, rather than having a standalone workshop on something like building resilience, which is really important. The building resilience theme would be over, let's say, 8 weeks, for example. So I think we touched on this previously, but building resilience isn't just something that you can attend one workshop and say, yes, now I am more resilient. It needs to be something that you work at over time. So by extending that learning period to 8 weeks, intertwining it with things like manager drop-ins, self-paced learning activities, smaller connection groups, mentor buddy programs, it really creates this holistic approach to learning and ticks all of those boxes in making sure that we are giving our graduates and those in our early careers opportunity to apply it back to the workplace. I think, Morgan, I loved your honesty there. I think, yes, it has been a challenge. This is a themed approach to learning is quite new. It's quite different. It's very different to what they might have experienced in terms of workshops previously. They probably weren't expecting this kind of level of support. So I think absolutely, I'm completely with you, Morgan. It's about habit forming for them. How are we going to, make sure that these resources are applied and offered in the way that is needed for that particular cohort? And I think that comes down to having that flexibility in your program and in your provider as well. So the themed approach to learning, I'm incredibly passionate about. I think it's just what the learning and development space needed, is a bit of a revamp as to what your classic development workshop is. It attaches that ROI for organisations and really does have that meaningful impact that graduates and those in the early career crave as well.
Yeah, thanks, Neave. And then I think just finally, I'm conscious of time, but line manager involvement in that themed approach is then high, which that second point there, that line manager training and buy-in. Yes, you can run a training session at the beginning of the program, but that continuous line manager involvement and buy-in to the whole program is really important for the success of it. Just wrapping up in summary, I think what have we talked about today? I think we need to embrace Gen Z. They are going to be our future leaders. They're going to break boundaries. They're going to be the next innovators and leaders of our organizations. So let's celebrate what they do bring and create that program, that structured professional skills program to support them with the challenges that they are facing. I think we need to be better in organizations at challenging each other to think about why we don't like some of the behaviors that Gen Z bring to work every day, leaving early, leaving on time without asking those around them. If there's any more work to do, why does that bother us? Why is that work life? Why do they push us in terms of the mental well-being? That's got to be celebrated. I think we need that within organizations. And then how can we support them really to focus on, we're hiring them for high potential, like I mentioned. How can we make sure that they achieve high performance? So going from that high potential to that high performance through their graduate development programme. So thank you to you all for joining. Thank you to the panel, particularly the Gen Z Advisory Board, and to Morgan for joining the session today with us. I'd like to open to any questions in the last few minutes, if there's any. Stephen, I'll pass back to you.
Yes, we've had a few through, and I'd like to echo that. Thanks, a great panel, lots of really good insights there. So we've had some questions through. Some of Atisha's already answered online, but I'll go back to those if we've got some time, because others might have opinions as well. But if I go to Laura's question first of all, which is open on the Q&A. So Laura is from the hospitality sector. 20% of employees are Gen Z, and what Laura talks about is actually about highs being comfortable running their own stores when actually the store's in a good position. It's running well, but actually a lot of the learning happens when things don't go so well, and also actually sometimes need to be running stores that are in a less tricky situation. Sorry, in a more tricky situation. And also that challenge of giving people responsibility where they might make mistakes. Mistakes can both be expensive cost-wise, but also in the case that Laura's put forward, can have severe consequences, allergens, food allergies, etc., etc. So the question from Laura, really, as I read it, is actually how do we get the right level of building, that opportunity to make mistakes and get things wrong and learn through those? And I guess also thinking about new entrants into the workplace now, how comfortable are they in dealing with that kind of challenging situation? Anybody got any views on that?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think absolutely. I think Laura, your question is something that we see a lot in our development workshops coming through is yes, it's very easy to be resilient when things are going well, when we're used to operating in a situation. Resilience is called into question when we go through hardships, when things aren't going right. So I think that's a really lovely point to raise. I think something I always say to our graduates and those in their early careers is that resilience is built. It's an active thing. So absolutely, we need to make sure that we are putting in practices now to be more resilient in the future. Whether that is gaining, a better perspective on it. Are we looking for the good in a situation? Are we assessing those mistakes? There's a fantastic module called the 5 Resilience Factors that kind of looks into this and focuses your attention on where you might need to build more resilience. But I think as well, actually, yes, how do you build kind of a culture of resilience and make sure that it's okay to make mistakes? I think that comes back to maybe Ronke's point about having a buddy, having a coach available to you. Are you celebrating those small wins, but also are we recognizing those things that are going wrong? So how are we using that to inform the future? So yeah, just a little insight. Again, I love talking about resilience. I could go all day, but I think it's a really important thing to remember that resilience is a long-term skill. It's an active skill that we need to build. So providing them with strategies, things like that, are going to really help when they're tackling those underperforming stores potentially.
Great, thanks, Neave. Jasmine, I can also see you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in here?
Yes, I just had something briefly to mention. I think Atisha has kind of addressed this in his written response, but a almost like sandbox or practice environment would be really beneficial here. If you can give us an example to go through, then those mistakes that we may make actually, although obviously in that scenario are big, don't have the same consequences, and then you can actively get feedback. I think as well, one of the things that I would say is stories and examples. Can you provide stories and examples across your industry where that has happened and show them to your new hires so that they understand those consequences? And yeah, I just think that that's critical.
Got it. Thanks. Sorry, we were going to say something, Jenny. Did I cut over you?
No, sorry, I was agreeing with everything that Jasmine said.
No worries. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I think we can squeeze in one of the questions that's already answered, because again, some others might have some views on these. So Victoria from Glasgow talked about that they are actually running a work readiness program, which covers a lot of the things that we've been talking about. But she talks about the challenge actually of getting uptake from students being tricky. And Victoria's question is, do you all think that students, graduates realise actually that they're lacking in some of these skills? They're skills that need to be developed, and they need to be developed over time. And if that's the case, how do we get that message across to individuals that they need to be developing these skills? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
Kieran, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I think for like broad majority of people, we are like very self-critical. Like we understand the areas that we are lacking in. What I think is the struggle is communicating that with other people, having that self like realization of it, because you don't want to be the only one that goes to these things and then realizing how much you're lacking. But it's not, you shouldn't view it as that. It should be viewed as an area that is you can develop on, build up, and make it more into something that you can succeed in.
Yeah, just to really quickly jump in, I couldn't agree more, Kieran. I think it's about saying to them, actually, let's enhance those skills, because I think we've discussed today is that, you know, those in their early careers, they have them, they're there somewhere. It's about how do we empower them? How do we bring it to the forefront again? So I think, Kieran, that's a really, really good point. It's about enhancing it and building on it, because learning never stops, as we know.
And I think, sorry,
Sorry.
Stephen, I think just to finish, Atisha, your comment around involving employers, Victoria, I think working alongside employers to run these sessions might elevate them a little bit if you're not doing that already, in terms of allowing graduates to recognise that these are the skills that employers need and they might be lacking in.
Definitely, and I think the more that we can encourage actually that integration of employers and the student life cycle, I think actually the stronger understanding of just that work environment will be. That's been a great session, and I really do appreciate all your time and efforts and inputs into bringing that subject to us and articulating. It's always great doing these sessions in partnerships with yourselves at Amberjack. They're always really rich sessions. I think I'll add my 2 pence. I've had a few conversations around skills recently, and I think it's a subject we're going to do more on, actually, because it's so essential to the changing world of work. And you know, I speak as somebody who's got a few grey hairs now. You do never stop learning these skills. There's a danger we think that presentation skills, communication skills, people skills are just, you know, they're quite easy to pick up, but actually they're not. They're complex and they take time. So your comment, Neave, about, you know, it's a lifelong journey we're talking about, I think is really important. Jenny, we'll be sending out the slides, etc., in a recording, won't we? Will there be a link on that for people to get in touch with you if they want to talk about this a bit more?
Absolutely. I think yeah, I mean, our website, feel free to Google Amberjack. We are Amberjack, and get in touch with us or find us on LinkedIn. There's been some questions we haven't managed to answer, so happy to have a chat with people individually if that's helpful afterwards. But yeah, we'll be sharing the slides, Stephen, and thanks everyone for coming.
Right, and yes, on that point, you will be getting a link through to the recording. So please do, you know, share the love. We're very keen for the knowledge that we make available to members is shared. So please feel free to pass those links along, etc. Get in touch with Jenny and the team if you want to follow up any more on this. So thanks again, folks. Like I said, really thank you for helping put this session together. Without partnerships with people like yourselves, we really wouldn't be able to bring the level of content we do to the ISE community. So thanks very much, everybody. Hope you all have a very good day. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.